Hello and welcome to my channel, Lessons for Little Blessings. I'm Tessa and we're going to dive right into teaching math today. Thank you for joining me today. My goal is to give you something useful that you can work on with your child or your student. So let's talk about place value. This is a fundamental skill in learning mathematics. And it falls under what educators call number sense, and like that name suggests, students need to be able to make sense of numbers. This is really foundational because if students don't have a good conceptual grasp on place value and what each digit is worth and the value, then as the numbers get bigger and the math becomes more complex, they're just going to struggle a lot more. So that's why repetitive practice of these conceptual skills using like physical blocks that they can move around and manipulate will really help and be beneficial for setting just that basic foundation of place value. So what is place value? It is the value of a digit depending on its place or position. So here's a little example. This number 468, this place is the ones, this place is the tens, and this place is the hundreds. So each digit in that number is in a certain position or place, and that gives it a different value. So this 4 being in the hundreds place is actually 400. The 6 being in the tens place is actually 60. And the 8 being in the ones place is 8. So that together gives us that number 468. So we know what it is and why we should teach it. Let's talk a little bit about some materials that can be helpful in teaching place value. And then we'll dive into some of the basics that you can teach your child. By the way, I have all the time codes or the chapters in the description box below, so you can click down there if you want to jump to a certain section or if you need to go back to a certain section later, as well as all the documents and links to print things out. Those will be down in the description box below as well. Okay, so some linking cubes or unifix cubes, you might see them called, anything that will get put together so they can make 10 together and then also break them apart for loose ones. Base 10 blocks, these are really helpful for around 2nd grade and up. And if you don't want to buy these, check the description. There will be a link to, you can print these and then just have them cut them out. A place value board, and you can just do a big line and make H and T for hundreds, tens, and then O for ones. Or when you're just starting out, T and O for tens and ones. Part, whole, and 10 frames will be really helpful working on making tens. Any kind of like popsicle sticks, or even straws. These are great for bundling and showing making a 10. There's a bundle of 10 and then the single ones. And so this is just kind of like the cubes. If you don't have cubes, you might have these, but just an object that they can physically bundle to see that group of 10, and then that they can take apart and see how the 110 is actually 10 ones. So that's really helpful. Any kind of number cards or even a playing deck. And then these are some 10 frame flash cards, and these are helpful where they can visually see how many more and they learn how to make 10. Some other things that will probably come up more in the second video, but I'll include it here on materials, is playing cards. Actually, I did mention that. And dice. Those will be in some of the games. We'll start with the basics using these materials. So you'll have linking cubes or any kind of little counter like these here. And basically what they're going to do is just count, like one-to-one correspondence. So that's meaning they're going to be moving as they count, so they can really understand that each one is a unit. So just put a handful in front of them and make them count. Or you could do little baggies of different objects and they just count. So that's really like preschool, kindergarten level, where you're just getting that basic counting in. Following that is where you'll really want to have some type of groupable object. So these linking cubes, or later on you'll see the sticks and the bundles. Those are great so they can physically move that and make a 10. So that's kind of the next thing, is ways to make a 10, or just grouping objects to make 10. So here he's making his 10, and then we're talking about that as a whole unit now. So now that 10 is 1 unit. So I'm making him recount so he can really understand that this group of 10 is now one whole unit, and it's 110. This is a great time to work on ways to make 10, or what numbers together make a 10. How can we make a 10? So great tools to use this is a part whole map, sometimes referred to as a number bond, and also a 10 frame. So that's what you'll see the practice here that we're doing. So we're looking at 10 as the whole thing here, and then the different parts that go together to make that 10. So you can just do lots of practice with this. The more familiar they are with how to make a 10, it'll just be that much easier when they go to working with multiple 10s. So I'm showing some basic ways here with the part whole and 10 frames. If you're interested in more about that, let me know in the comments and I can try to put together more specific things to do with that. But this is just to give you some quick ideas. And I really like using the blocks with these so they can have that visual representation of the number, and it kind of helps them prove it, which they'll be doing more as they go. Okay, so back to the blocks and moving on. So this is where you're going to give them more than 10, and they're going to be grouping 10s and 1s. So basically a group of 10 and then the leftover 1s. So similar to before, just give them a handful, a big handful this time, and have them group together their 10s and then what's left over. And do this a lot. This is really good practice with them bundling 10s and 1s. And also this is a great time to use those popsicle sticks too, where they can physically bundle those up and see how it is a bundle of 10. So it is 110, and really having them get a lot of practice with that so they can understand that concept will help with the more abstract numbers as they move forward. So just work with those teen numbers, a 10 and then extra 1s for a while there, and then move on to like 2 10s where they'll have a group of 20. And this is a great time to show them how much faster it is, and why do we group numbers into 10s and 1s, because it is so much faster to count 2 bundles of 10s and 2 loose 1s as opposed to say like 22 1s, right? So you can do a lot of that practice too, so they can see the point of why do we group things in 10s, and then later on hundreds and thousands beyond. So kind of a next progression would be to introduce this chart, or this 10s and 1s map, so they can start getting that number associated with the picture of the blocks or sticks that they're using. So this is where you'll start talking about the value of each digit and why it matters where you write the digit. That 1, if it's in the 10s, it means 10. That's the value of that digit because it is 110. If that's in the 1s place, that's just one single 1. So they start seeing how important it is to get the digit in the right place because it means a totally different number. So spend a decent amount of time here just really getting down those teen numbers with a 10 and some 1s, then moving to 2 10s, so in the 20s, and then we'll start breaking that down a little bit more. And again, using these blocks or sticks as they write the numbers too will really help them make that connection from concrete to abstract numbers. Progressing from here, you can show different ways to write that number, kind of like this with 10s and 1s, and using the expanded form versus the standard form, which you'll see here. So expanded, you're just breaking it apart into the 1s, 10s, hundreds, and then so on. So they should be able to take a number in standard form here and break that apart into the expanded form and know how many 1s, 10s, hundreds are in that number. In addition to that, you want them to be able to look at a number there in standard form and be able to say what is the value of each digit. So for example, here with that number 12, we're breaking it down into the 10s and 1s. So that value of the 1 is actually 10. The value of the 2 is 2 still because we're talking 1s. Just keep working on this. This can be tricky, especially when you start getting into the tens, hundreds, where the value is different than just the digit that they're looking at. So they might be able to tell you that that is a 3 in the tens place, but then when you ask what's the value, they're likely going to want to say 3, but it's 3 tens, which is 30. So just keep practicing it. They will get it with repetition. A quick little exercise you can do to practice the value is just to write out a number and then underline one digit and ask them to tell you the value of the underlined digit. So in this example here with the number 43, the 4 is underlined. So on the line next to it, they would write the value, which would be 40 because it's 4 tens. Now, if they can't remember or they write a 4, have them draw the blocks or have them use blocks to show, and then they will see visually that that is 4 tens. Speaking of drawing blocks, that would be the base 10 blocks, which we see here. This would be a great time when you're getting into multiple tens to use these as opposed to those linking cubes, because you don't have time to wait for them to connect 30 or so blocks together. So these are great. And once they're comfortable using those, instead of getting them out every time, we would just have them draw the blocks. So I'll show you here an example. So a quick way to have them draw it so they're not spending a bunch of time is just a stick for a 10, a dot for the ones, and then if they're in the hundreds, just a square. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Otherwise, this video is going to be way too long, but I wanted to just do a quick recap of kind of the stages of place value development. So you kind of just gauge on your kids, but this hopefully will help just give you a basic idea. So pre-kindergarten, so preschool and kindergarten, you're going to be working on counting that 1 to 1, count lots of different objects, different groups, and different ways to make the number 10. In first grade, you're going to continue counting groups of objects. You're going to continue working on different ways to make that number 10. And you're also going to be working on making a 10 with those linking cubes, or you could use the sticks and bundle them together. But you're working with tens and ones here. Moving on to roughly second grade, you're going to begin using those base 10 blocks with the tens and the ones, and you're going to be building up to hundreds. You're going to work on drawing the base 10 blocks for a quick visual, and there'll be an example in the next slide here. Begin representing numbers in other ways. So the standard form, expanded form that we kind of talked about earlier, and I'll show you in the next slide, you'll have all those examples. And then you're going to begin addition of 2-digit numbers as well as subtraction without regrouping first, using the base 10 blocks and drawing the blocks. Okay, and then you'll also begin subtraction with regrouping. If you learned it called borrowing, but here we call it regrouping. And using the blocks is key so they can see how to break up that 10. Students will have trouble with subtraction and regrouping if they don't understand. So all that basic foundational skills that you've been doing leading up to this will help them with regrouping and understanding that. So here are different ways to represent a number. So the block drawings, you can see just how to do a quick representation, and then the standard form, expanded form in base 10 units, so they know how many hundreds, tens, ones, in the word form, and then the place value chart. Moving on to third grade, they're going to continue using those base 10 blocks if they need. More than likely, they're just going to be doing a quick drawing if they need. Then you're also going to be working on ways to represent numbers. You're just working on bigger numbers. So going up to thousands here, and then addition and subtraction of 3-digit numbers, including subtraction with regrouping. So hopefully they really mastered it before they're at this level. And then fourth and fifth grade, you're obviously continuing with those bigger numbers into thousands and beyond. And then here you really focus on the fractions and decimals, which is still that base 10 system. So when they can break up the numbers with tens and ones, all of that is going to help them with their fractions and their decimals. Those are just the parts of one whole numbers. As always, I hope this video gives you some helpful ideas in working with your child. Please consider liking this video and subscribing for more educational activities to help your kids thrive. And stay tuned for the next part of this place value video that'll be coming out, and it'll have more specific games to keep building on that foundational knowledge that we worked on in this video. Thanks for watching and have a blessed day.